I broke the one rule you never break in a high-rise. I went upstairs, not to complain about the heat, not to ask for a light bulb, not to introduce myself like a normal tenant. I climbed 14 floors with an eviction notice folded in my fist, and my pride bleeding out of me with every step. If you like stories where one choice detonates a life, subscribe now, because the thing Adrienne Vale offered me at her door is still the most dangerous sentence I have ever heard. It was raining hard enough to turn the lobby windows into gray glass. The security guard barely looked up when I passed, like he already knew why people went to the penthouse at night. In the elevator, I watched the numbers climb and tried to practice a lie that sounded like dignity. Hi, I'm Maya from 4C. I'm just behind this month. 2 months, actually. 2 months behind and one unopened email away from my landlord's attorney. My apartment smelled like wet shoes and reheated noodles. I had spent the last hour staring at the notice taped to my door, reading the same line until it stopped feeling like English. Past due. Pay within 10 days. Vacate. The cafe I worked at closed in January. The owner called it temporary, then emptied the registers and disappeared. My savings died in little pieces. A delivery app subscription, a bus pass, a bag of groceries that lasted 3 days. I kept telling myself I would catch up next week. Then next week became a second late fee. Adrienne Vale owned the building. Everyone said it like a warning. The way people say a storm name when it is still offshore. I had seen her once, really seen her in the stairwell. She was coming down fast, phone pressed to her ear, a gray coat thrown over her shoulders like she had dressed without looking. She didn't match the building's polished calm. She looked sharper than it, like she could cut through marble. When she passed, she smelled like jasmine and something clean, like rain on stone. She glanced at me and didn't smile. Not rude, just precise. Now I stood outside her door with my heart thudding against my ribs like it wanted out. I knocked. Footsteps, soft and measured. The door opened, and there she was in a charcoal cardigan and bare feet, hair loose, eyes the color of dark tea. She didn't look surprised to see me. She looked like she had been timing me. "Maya Quinn," she said. Not a question. I froze. "Yes, I'm from 4C. I know." Her gaze moved to my hands, the paper, the shaking. "I was wondering when you'd come up." The hallway behind her glowed with warm light. I caught a glimpse of white countertops, a wall of books, the edge of a city view. It looked like another planet. "I just need more time," I said. "A week, 2. I'm interviewing. I can show you emails, You're 62 days behind." She said it gently, which somehow made it worse. "If you can't pay, I replace you. That's the rule." "I know." My throat tightened. "I'm trying. I'm not lazy. I'm just..." The word broke apart before it reached my tongue. Adrienne watched me for a long second. Not my clothes, not my face, my posture. The way my shoulders refused to drop even when I was begging. Her expression shifted, almost invisible, like a lock turning. "You shouldn't have to crawl for something this small." Silence filled the doorway. The hallway carpet muffled every sound, but I could still hear the rain against the building. I swallowed. "I'm sorry. I'll go." "No." She stepped back, opening the door wider. "Come in." "I can't. It's late." "Exactly." She said it like it mattered. "Come in anyway." I should have walked away. I should have taken the notice downstairs, packed my things, asked my sister for a couch. I did none of that. I stepped into her penthouse and felt the air change around me. Her place didn't scream wealth. It whispered control. Everything had a reason. A glass of water on a coaster aligned with the edge of the table. A throw blanket folded as if no one had ever been cold. A single framed photograph turned slightly away from the room, as if even memories were kept private. She moved to the kitchen and poured 2 glasses of red wine without asking. The bottle made no sound against the counter. She handed me one, then waited until I held it before speaking. "This is not an offer I make to people," she said, "so listen carefully." My fingers tightened around the stem. "What offer?" She leaned against the marble island, calm as a judge. "I can erase the arrears. No fees, no notices, no more paper on your door." My breath hitched. "How?" Her eyes stayed on mine. "You help me." "With what?" I asked, and immediately hated how hopeful I sounded. Adriana's mouth curved, not quite a smile. "Personal things, small errands, a meal occasionally, organizing, some nights just sitting here. Just sitting." She nodded once, like she had already decided this was true. "Company." The word landed heavy. My mind jumped to all the ugly stories people tell about power and hunger and lonely rich women. I heard my own pulse and nothing else. "You're offering me to hang out with you," I said. "I'm offering you to be here when I ask," she corrected. "And you can say no. I'm not trapping you. But the building, the notice, the empty bank account, the damp smell of my apartment, all of it pressed into my spine. I forced myself to ask the only question that mattered. Why me? Adrienne's gaze dipped to my mouth, then back up. Because you don't look at me like I'm a wallet. I didn't know what to do with that. She lifted her glass and took a sip. You can walk out. I won't punish you, but I won't pretend I didn't want this. Want what? The truth, she said, and her voice dropped. That I live alone in a building full of people, and none of them feel real when they speak to me. It wasn't a speech. It was a fact, the kind you can't take back. I stared at the city through the windows, lights smeared by rain. If I agree, does that mean I'm paid? Adrienne's eyes narrowed. Not angry, just assessing. You would not be paid. Your rent would be handled, and your unit would remain yours. That's payment, I said softly. It's not a job, she replied. It's an arrangement, a deal, a word with teeth. I swallowed hard. What are the rules? Her gaze softened, almost fractionally. Rule 1, you leave when you want, no matter what I ask. Rule 2, I never enter your unit without permission. Rule 3, if you ever feel coerced, you end it, immediately. And if you decide you're done with me, I asked, hating the tremor in my voice. Adrienne set her glass down. Then I give you 30 days to figure it out before you owe me anything again. I'm not cruel, Maya. She said my name like she'd been holding it on her tongue. My chest felt tight. My mind searched for a safe answer and came back empty. So I nodded once. Adrienne's shoulders loosened, like she had been holding her breath for weeks. Good, she said. Then start small. Sit. I sat on a stool by the island. The leather was cool under my palms. She poured a little more wine in my glass and didn't touch me, which somehow made the space between us louder. You look like you're waiting for me to lunge, she said. I'm waiting for the catch. There isn't a catch, she replied. There's only what you already understand. People will call this inappropriate. They will say I have power. They will say you have motive. I can't stop them. What can you stop? I asked. Adrienne's eyes held mine, steady. You from being homeless. The words hit me harder than any threat. I left her penthouse an hour later with nothing signed, nothing recorded, nothing but a new weight in my pocket. Not money. A key card she insisted I keep in case you need it. My palms smelled faintly like her soap. In my unit, the ceiling felt lower than it had before. I lay in bed with my phone face down and listened to the rain, waiting for my guilt to arrive. It didn't. Instead, at 7:12 the next evening, my phone buzzed. 8 p.m. Dinner. Don't come in a hoodie. I stared at the message so long the screen dimmed. The notice on my table looked smaller than it had yesterday, like paper could be intimidated. At 7:58, I knocked. Adrienne opened the door in a black dress that made the hallway lights seem warmer. Her hair was pinned back loosely, like she didn't need effort to look like trouble. You came, she said. You asked. A quiet curve of her lips. Good. Dinner was simple. Pasta, a salad, wine. She didn't try to charm me. She didn't ask for details I didn't offer. She asked about my family, what I studied before I dropped out, the kind of music that made me feel less alone. Her voice stayed controlled, but her attention never drifted. When I spoke, she listened like it mattered. Halfway through, she set her fork down and looked at me over her glass. Do you know why I bought this building? To make money, I said. Adrienne laughed once, a sound without brightness. Everyone thinks that. Why then? Because I needed somewhere I could lock the door and not be touched, she said. The sentence changed the room. It wasn't a confession with tears. It was an old scar shown without permission. I didn't ask who hurt her. I didn't ask what kind of touch she meant. I just said, and did it work? Her gaze stayed on mine. Until you knocked. My breath caught. I should have looked away. I didn't. You're not good at this, I said, and immediately regretted it. Good at what? At pretending you don't want anything. Adrienne's eyes flickered like a muscle twitch. Neither are you. When she reached across the table, she didn't grab me. She brushed her fingertips against my wrist. A touch so light it felt like a question. Her thumb traced the vein there, slow, like she was reading something in my skin. I didn't pull back. The apartment went quiet, except for the refrigerator hum. Her face was close enough that I could see the faint shadow beneath her eyes. The kind sleep doesn't fix. You can tell me to stop, she whispered. I should have. I didn't. So she leaned forward and kissed me, careful at first, then steadier when I didn't move away. It was nothing like the stories in my head. It wasn't hunger. It was restraint breaking. When she finally pulled back, she searched my face like she was afraid she'd lost something. I didn't mean to make you feel owned, she said. You didn't, I replied, and my voice sounded unfamiliar. I just didn't expect you to be real. Adrienne's mouth tightened, like emotion was an inconvenience. Be here when I ask, she said softly. That's all I wanted. I went downstairs later with my lips still warm and my thoughts tangled. In my room, I sat at the window and watched her penthouse lights glow above me. I told myself I could leave at any time. I told myself it was simple. At noon the next day, Adrienne's phone rang while we sat at her kitchen island drinking coffee. I wasn't supposed to be there at noon. I was supposed to be sending job applications. The caller ID flashed, Marjorie King bored. Adrienne stared at the screen for one beat too long before she answered. Adrienne Vale, she said, voice neutral. I heard a woman on speaker, brisk and practiced. We need to speak today. Immediately. Adrienne's eyes flicked toward me, then away. I'm in the middle of something. You're in the middle of an ethical violation, the woman snapped. A tenant reported seeing Maya Quinn in your unit after midnight. There are messages circulating. We have an emergency meeting at 5. My stomach turned to ice. The coffee in my hand tasted like metal. Adrienne's jaw tightened. We're handling it. Handle it before we do, Marjorie said, and the line went dead. For a long moment, Adrienne didn't move. She didn't look at me. Her hand stayed wrapped around the phone like she could crush it. I'm sorry, I said automatically. Adrienne finally lifted her gaze. Don't apologize for existing. It's my fault, I insisted. I should have been more careful. We're in a building full of people who collect secrets like coins, she replied. Her voice stayed calm, but the muscles in her throat worked as if she were swallowing glass. Someone saw you. Someone decided it was profitable. My stomach nodded. What does the board actually control? Too much, Adrienne said. They can't remove me as owner, but they can make my life a lawsuit. They can bleed time. They can freeze approvals. They can poison the building until it's not worth keeping. I stared at her penthouse windows. The city looked indifferent, bright, and far away. So what do we do? Adrienne's mouth pressed into a thin line. We stopped giving them a story. It sounded like a decision. It sounded like distance. I felt my chest tighten. Meaning? Meaning we don't touch in public. You don't come up through the lobby. You don't leave at dawn. She paused, then added, quieter. Meaning we end the arrangement. The words hit like a slap. I didn't move. I didn't blink. I just watched her, waiting for her to say it was a test. She didn't. Adrienne set her phone down. They'll call it predatory, Maya. Whether it is or not. That's how the world protects itself. Is it? I asked, and my voice came out sharper than I intended. Predatory. Her eyes snapped to mine. No. Then don't let them rename it, I said. Don't let them turn it into something disgusting just because they need a villain. Adrienne's expression cracked, almost invisible. You think they'll listen to you? I stood up. My chair scraped softly against the floor. I don't care if they listen. I care what you do. She looked at me like she was seeing the cost of her own caution for the first time. I can't lose the building, she said, and it sounded like a confession. It's not just money, it's proof. It's my life staying upright. And I'm what? I asked. A mistake you can erase to keep your proof? Adrienne flinched. The reaction was small, but it was real. She stood too, slow and careful, like sudden movement might shatter us. You're not a mistake, she said. You're the first thing that's felt like mine in years. I didn't know what to do with that either. My eyes burned anyway. Adrienne stepped closer, but she didn't touch me. She hovered, hands open at her sides. I want you, she said softly. I also know what people do when they smell weakness on someone like me. Someone like you, I repeated. Say it. Rich, powerful, untouchable. Adrienne's mouth tightened. Yes. And someone like me, I said. Disposable. Her eyes held mine, and for the first time I saw fear there, raw and unhidden. Not fear of the board, fear of being seen as the monster they wanted. I won't let them make you disposable, she said. I believed her, which made it worse. That afternoon, I went downstairs and tried to sit in my unit like I hadn't just walked into a storm. I opened my laptop and stared at job listings until the words blurred. My phone stayed silent. No message from Adrienne, no apology, no plan. Just silence with teeth. At 9:03, there was a knock. I opened the door and Adrienne stood there without makeup, hair loose, coat thrown over a sweater like she'd left in a hurry. She looked less like an owner and more like a woman who had run out of safe places to stand. I spoke to Marjorie again, she said. My throat tightened. And Adrienne exhaled. She wants me to either sell the building or end this. She said it like she was offering mercy. Mercy, I echoed. Adrienne stepped inside my unit without being invited. The room was small enough that her presence changed the air instantly. She looked around, taking in the worn couch, the chipped mug on the counter, the rain stain near the window. I hate that you live like this, she said quietly. I hate that you think you can fix everything with money, I snapped, then regretted it. Adrienne didn't flinch this time. You're right, she said. That's what they accuse me of. Buying, controlling, owning. Her eyes lifted to mine. So I'm going to do something I can't undo. My pulse quickened. What? Adrienne reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a manila envelope. Thick. Official. She set it on my table like it was a weapon. This is the deed transfer for 4C, she said. Filed, notarized. It becomes effective tomorrow morning. My brain refused to understand. What are you talking about? I'm giving you your unit, she said, voice steady, free and clear. I stared at the envelope as if it might explode. Adrienne, you can't just… I can, she cut in gently. And I will. My mouth opened, but no sound came out. She stepped closer, eyes shining with something she didn't let spill. They can't scream power imbalance if you're not my tenant. They can't claim you stayed because you had to. They can't hold rent over you because there is no rent to hold. You're giving away property because of me, I whispered. I'm removing the only chain between us, she corrected. So when you stay, it's because you chose me. Tears burned behind my eyes. That's insane. Adrienne's lips curved, faint and exhausted. Yes. What if I don't want it? I demanded, partly because I wanted her to stop, partly because I wanted her to prove she wouldn't. Adrienne's voice softened. Then I keep it in your name anyway. I don't get to offer you freedom and then take it back because you're scared. I laughed once, sharp and broken. You think I'm scared? I think you're smart, Adrienne said. Smart people get scared when the ground shifts. My hands shook as I touched the envelope. Paper, ink, a life-changing decision sealed with stamps. Why now? I whispered. Why this dramatic? Adrienne's gaze held mine. Because I watched you blame yourself for my risk, and I realized you were already paying with your spine. I couldn't speak. My chest felt too full. Adrienne took my face gently, palms warm against my cheeks. You don't owe me rent, she said. You don't owe me company. You don't owe me anything. And what do you owe me? I asked. Her voice broke, just once. A choice. The next day, the board meeting happened in a conference room off the lobby that smelled like old paper and expensive cologne. Adrienne asked me not to attend. I sat in the back anyway, hood up, hands clasped, watching through the glass. Marjorie King ran the meeting like a trial. She was in her 50s, sharp hair, sharper eyes, a woman who could turn etiquette into a knife. A few board members sat beside her, faces arranged in practiced concern. They talked about impropriety, about risk to the building's reputation, about appearance. They said my name like it was a rumor. When Adrienne stood to speak, she didn't shake. She clasped her hands in front of her and looked around the room as if she owned the air. I understand your concerns, she said, and I won't insult you by pretending power doesn't exist in relationships. But I will clarify one thing for the record. Marjorie's lips thinned. Go on. Adrienne's eyes found mine through the glass. Her voice sharpened. Maya Quinn is not my tenant anymore. As of this morning, Unit 4C has been transferred into her name. She owns it. The room moved like a disturbed pond. Gasps, murmurs. Someone actually laughed, disbelieving. Marjorie's composure cracked. You cannot simply gift property to avoid scrutiny. I can, Adrienne said. And I did. The paperwork is filed. If you'd like, your counsel can verify it. Marjorie's face reddened. This is absurd. Adrienne didn't blink. Some things are worth more than optics. And you're doing this for… what? Marjorie demanded. For a fling? Adrienne's eyes didn't leave mine. For someone I love. The words hung in the room like a bell struck hard. The meeting tried to continue, but the air had already changed. They had nothing clean to hold against her anymore. They could still gossip, still punish with whispers. But legally, the leverage was gone. When the room finally emptied, I slipped out into the hall, heart hammering. Adrienne stepped out a moment later, her face pale, her posture still rigid as if she'd been braced for impact. You gave me a home, I whispered, voice shaking. Adrienne took my hand for the first time in public, right there in the hallway where cameras watched. She didn't care. I gave you a door that no one can threaten to lock. My eyes filled. You're reckless. She almost smiled. Only about you. The week that followed felt like walking through fog. Neighbors whispered in elevators. A man on the 6th floor stared at me like I was a headline. Mrs. Park from 3B squeezed my hand and said nothing, which somehow mattered more than words. Adrienne kept distance in the lobby, face controlled, voice polite, but every night she came to my door with takeout or a bottle of wine or nothing at all. Sometimes we sat on my couch and talked about things that had nothing to do with the building. Music, childhood, the kind of silence that didn't demand performance. One Friday, she showed up looking wrecked. Her eyes were rimmed red, her coat damp. She sat on my couch like she'd forgotten how to stand. They're pushing for a formal review anyway, she said. Not about you, about me, about my management, about ethics. They want me to step away from day-to-day control. Will you? I asked. Adrienne stared at the wall for a long moment. I'm tired, she admitted. I'm tired of acting like every desire makes me weak. I moved closer. Then stop acting. Her gaze flicked to mine, startled by how simple that sounded. At midnight, she kissed me, slow and careful, as if she was learning a new language. When we finally pulled apart, she rested her forehead against mine. I don't know how to do this without controlling it, she whispered. You don't, I said. You just do it. 2 weeks later, she hired a property manager and stepped back publicly. The board still held meetings, but their edge dulled without rent as a weapon. Adrian suggested we leave the city for a weekend. Just air, she said. No elevators, no eyes. So we drove north, away from glass towers and surveillance cameras, into trees that swallowed the highway noise. She rented a small cabin by a lake, the kind of place that looked like it belonged in a quiet life neither of us had planned. The first day we did almost nothing. We sat on the porch with blankets and hot coffee. We read books without finishing chapters. We watched the lake water move like breath. That night, by the fireplace, Adrian turned to me with a look I hadn't seen before, unarmored. I need to tell you something, she said. My stomach tightened. What? Adrian swallowed. When I made that offer, the deal, the arrangement, I told myself it was loneliness, that I needed company, that it was harmless. And it wasn't? I asked. Her cheeks flushed faintly, like she hated being transparent. I'd noticed you months before you ever came upstairs, she admitted. The way you held the door for people, the way you apologized when you didn't need to, the way you sat by your window reading like you were building a world inside your head. I stared at her, surprised. You were watching me. Adrian nodded once, eyes fixed on the fire. Not in a creepy way. In a way that made me feel less dead. My throat tightened. Why didn't you just ask me out? Adrian laughed softly, but it held no humor. Because I owned your lease. Because you were struggling. Because I thought you'd look at me and see a predator. I reached for her hand. I don't see that. Adrian turned to me then, eyes shining. I didn't think someone like you would choose someone like me, Maya. Not once you had the option. The cabin crackled. Outside, the lake lay black under starlight, quiet enough to hear our breathing. I squeezed her hand. Then I'm choosing you now. Adrian's eyes closed, and for a second, she looked like she might fall apart. Then she leaned in and kissed me with a steadiness that felt like a promise. In the morning, the lake was silver and still. Adrian made coffee and watched me like she was memorizing an escape route she didn't want to take. When we drove back to the city, the buildings looked the same, but something in us didn't. And that was when I realized the board wasn't the real danger. The real danger was how easy it had become to imagine a life where I stayed. Back in Halcyon Towers, the gossip had cooled into routine. People stopped whispering like we were scandal and started whispering like we were weather. Some residents avoided me. Others nodded, cautious but curious. A few acted like nothing happened, which was its own kindness. Adrian adjusted to not being in charge of everything. It didn't look graceful at first. She checked her phone too often. She drafted emails, deleted them, drafted again. She hovered at the edge of meetings like someone who had built a fortress and now had to live outside the walls. But she also did things she never did before. She joined the community meeting and stayed for the whole thing. She listened to complaints about the laundry machines without rolling her eyes. She asked Mrs. Park about her grandson's college applications and actually remembered the answer. I got a job at a small bookstore 3 blocks away. Not glamorous, not lucrative, but I loved it immediately. The owner, Ruth, was in her 70s and had the sharpness of someone who had survived every version of the world. She paid me fairly, refused to let me apologize for needing shifts, and said things like, if you're going to be broke, at least be broke around books. Adrian started coming by near closing. She never made it obvious. She'd browse the same shelf, pretend to read the back of the same paperback, then look up when she thought I wasn't watching. Ruth noticed instantly. One night after Adrian left, Ruth leaned on the counter and said, "That woman walks like she's used to being obeyed." I laughed. She is. Ruth hummed. Good. Maybe she'll learn to be loved instead. The first time Adrian heard that, she looked offended for half a second, then quiet. Later in my kitchen, she said, "Your boss is terrifying." "She likes you," I told her. Adrian's mouth tightened. That might be worse. Days softened into a rhythm. We cooked in my unit, now mine, in a way that still felt unreal. Adrian would bring groceries and pretend she didn't care about labels. I'd chop onions and watch her hands, the way she handled knives like someone trained to avoid mistakes. Sometimes we stayed in her penthouse, but more often she came down to mine, like she needed the smaller space to remind her she didn't have to perform. One evening, as we washed dishes, she asked, "Do you ever think about leaving the city?" I shrugged. "Sometimes, but I don't have a map." Adrian dried her hands slowly. "You're too young to build a life out of survival." "You're not," I said, and the words surprised me. Adrian's eyes lifted. I built my life out of not needing anyone. And are you proud of that? I asked. She didn't answer immediately. She looked at the sink, at the water drops on the steel. I'm proud of what it protected me from, she said. I'm not proud of what it cost. I stepped closer and rested my forehead against her shoulder. Then let it cost less now. Her hand rose into my hair, gentle, almost uncertain. You make it sound easy, she murmured. It isn't easy, I said. It's just simple. There were consequences anyway. A formal ethics review opened, more about Adrian's management practices than our relationship. The property manager handled most of it. Lawyers wrote letters. Meetings happened behind closed doors. Adrienne took it all with a face that didn't flinch, but at night, when she came to my unit, her shoulders dropped like she was finally allowed to be human. One night, she sat on my couch and stared at nothing. What if I ruined everything I built? She asked softly, for something that doesn't last. I turned her face toward mine. Then you would have built it wrong, I said. Because the point of a life isn't to keep it untouched. Adrienne's eyes filled. She blinked hard, like tears were another thing she refused to owe. I'm not good at being chosen, she admitted. I kissed her forehead. Get used to it. 6 months passed. We hosted a dinner in the penthouse, not a party for show, just a table with people we actually liked. Mrs. Park came, wearing a sweater she said her sister mailed from Seoul. Ruth came, bringing a bottle of wine and a look that made even the board members nervous. A couple neighbors we'd grown close to showed up and acted like it was the most normal thing in the world, that the woman who used to live behind a locked door was now laughing in her own kitchen. I watched Adrienne from across the table. She didn't dominate the room. She didn't perform control. She listened. She touched my hand when she thought no one noticed, then stopped hiding it when she realized no one cared. After everyone left, we cleaned up together. Plates clinked. Water ran. The city hummed outside like a distant engine. Adrienne wrapped her arms around my waist from behind. Happy? She asked, her mouth against my hair. Very, I said. She stayed still for a moment, then asked, almost cautiously, do you ever regret it? The board, the whispers, the paperwork? I turned in her arms and looked up at her. Do you? Adrienne shook her head immediately. Not for a second. Her certainty made my throat tighten. You gave up control for me. I didn't give it up, she said. I traded it for something better. A year after the night I knocked on her door, rain came back in the same heavy sheets. The city looked washed, as if it couldn't decide whether to start over. Adrienne and I stood on her balcony with blankets around our shoulders, watching the streetlights blur through the downpour. Her arm was around me, firm and warm. Do you remember what you said the first night? She asked. I smiled. You said I could leave whenever I wanted. She exhaled, a quiet laugh. That too. What then? I told you to stay until the rain stopped, she said. I leaned into her, and I did. Adrienne turned to face me. Rain misted her hair, darkened her lashes. Her eyes were serious in a way that made my stomach flip. The rain stopped a long time ago, she said. And you're still here. I touched her cheek. I'm not here because I owe you. I'm here because you chose me when you didn't have to. Adrienne's throat worked. She reached into the pocket of her coat and pulled out a small box. Her hands trembled just a little. I've negotiated million-dollar deals without blinking, she said, voice shaking. But this is somehow harder. My breath caught. Adrienne, she opened the box. A simple silver ring, a small stone that caught the balcony light like a held breath. I know it hasn't been decades, she said. I know we've already been through more than most people survive in years. But I also know I want every morning with you, not just the safe ones. Tears filled my eyes so fast it embarrassed me. Maya, she whispered, using my name like a prayer. Will you marry me? I nodded, unable to speak at first. Then I laughed through the tears. Yes, of course. Adrienne slid the ring onto my finger and kissed me, soft and certain, with rain on our faces and the city below pretending not to watch. The next morning, the lobby cameras caught us walking out side by side, not hiding. A couple residents stared. A teenager in the elevator smiled and said, "Congrats," like we were ordinary. Marjorie's office sent a final email about ongoing review protocols, but it read more like paperwork than threat. The building kept standing. So did we. When we pulled back on the balcony, Adrienne pressed her forehead to mine. You changed everything, she whispered. How? I asked, my voice rough. You reminded me what it feels like to want something and not turn it into a transaction, she said. To surrender without losing myself. I swallowed. You reminded me what it feels like to be chosen, not rescued. Chosen. Adrienne's eyes shone. We did both, she said, in different ways. The rain kept falling and we didn't move, not because we were waiting for it to stop, but because we had learned something neither of us knew how to ask for a year ago. If you've ever taken a risk for someone and it scared you, tell me in the comments. I read them. And if you want more stories where the first knock changes everything, tap the channel and subscribe.